So the real reason I went to boxing and joined the club was curiosity. I knew the local amateur club was a 2-minute walk from my house, and I wanted to see what it was like, and I didn't know what it was going to be like when I get down there. But once I started sparring, like you said, I was a quiet kid on the street, and I wasn't bullied or anything, it was just kids being kids, but I would have shied away if anybody got aggressive or tried to have a fight. I would have walked away and backed off. But when I joined the boxing club, I started to spar pretty early, and I was guys that I wouldn't have opened my mouth to in the street, I was beating up in the gym, and I liked that. And that was the real reason why I stuck it out. I was far from a big guy in the street. I was a quiet kid, but in the boxing club, I was the one that was getting better of the loudmouths, and I like that. It's a bit of machoism. It's human nature, but I just liked being better than the next kid. It gave me confidence, yes, certainly, but it didn't suddenly turn me into a kid on the street that was picking on other kids because I was beating them up in the boxing club. It just gave me a self-confidence and made me realise that I can, if I can beat them up in a ring, I'm pretty sure I could do it in the street too. So it's not as if I was running around throwing my weight about or anything like that, but it just gave me a bit of a self-confidence. And boxing as well is always a sport that instills discipline. It's not just about, they tend to try to make kids, they would almost go to the point of not fighting in the street, but if you have to, you're able to defend yourself. So I knew I could do that if I had to, but I was in very, very little street fights as a kid growing up, even after I joined the boxing club. I remember the old gym. It's changed a lot. It's still in the same place, but it's changed a lot since I started. And remember they used to have they got these wooden boards out, and you used to have to skip on them and stuff. But the very first night I went to the club, there was me and a group of friends came down, and I was told to kind of sit and watch. I wasn't allowed to train the first night. I was 7 years old, so pretty young. And when I was 7, I probably looked like I was 5. So the coaches were kind of a bit like, maybe a bit too young to come down. So in this day and age, I don't think you'd be able to do it at that age. I think 7's probably too young. But I went down, I sat and watched it, and I came back the next night and they allowed me to train, and that was it. I was hooked. I stayed there. I stayed there from 7 years old, and I'm currently still a boxer. I knew it was good by the time I hit about 11. I knew I was a decent fighter. I used to be called a lot of people who didn't even know my name in Tigers Bay. They'd see me walking from my house to the boxing club, and people would say, "There's the boxer." They would know me as the boxer. So I always had that kind of image, and you imagine me walking down as a 7 to 11-year-old, walking down with a little rucksack 3 nights a week, sometimes more, to the boxing club, rain, hail or snow, and people just got used to seeing me and used to me being the boxer. Now everyone in Tigers Bay at some point, my age group anyway, would have been in the boxing club trained. Some of them would have stuck it out for a couple of years, maybe a few weeks, a few days, but I was the one that stuck it out. And I was aware probably when I was about 11, 12 that I was decent at it. And I had already a decent record by that point. I hadn't lost many fights, and I was getting a wee bit of a name and a reputation as being half decent. Well, there was times I didn't want to go. My mum forced me in as well, and I think maybe she thought that she realised that it was giving me the confidence that I had. Maybe she realised that I was decent at it as well and potential career option. I don't know, but there was times where. Because at times when you're very young, it seemed almost military to me, the boxing club. It's changed now, and how they train kids is completely different. But it was hard, and it was 3 rounds of a warm-up, 3 rounds of skipping, 3 rounds of bags, 3 rounds of pads, 3 rounds of abs and crunches at the end. That was it, same old routine every Monday, Wednesday and Friday. So at times I didn't want to go down, and I'd rather be playing out in the street with my mates, playing football or playing, I was going to say PlayStation, I don't think I had a PlayStation, Sega Mega Drive or whatever it was then. And I was kind of pushed out the door almost at times by my mum. I resented it a wee bit at times, didn't want to go all the time, but I always made sure I did. There was a period in my career when I was about 16 to 18 where I wasn't having the most success. I was doing things that 16 to 18-year-olds do and starting to get a taste for a drink at the weekend up the park with my mates and stuff, and chasing girls and everything else that boys at that age do. And I suffered a few defeats and didn't go off the rails, but I wasn't putting in the effort. There was a real turning point in my career when I was maybe about 21. I was still an amateur at the time, but I'd lost to a guy called Kevin Fennessy in the Irish Championships. And to be honest, Kevin was not a bad fighter, but what I wanted to do, at that stage I knew it was going to be my career, and I wanted to be a professional boxer. And I shouldn't have been losing to people like Kevin Fennessy. Anyway, he beat me fair and square. I went home, I was with, well, she was my girlfriend at the time, but now my wife, Christine. And I just had a talk to her, and I said, look, I'm going to pack it in. What's the point of doing this if I can't beat guys like him? She kind of had a word with me and said, look, stick it out. She understood that I wasn't training how I should have been, and I was maybe putting 2 weeks of hard training in before a fight, which isn't enough. And I stuck it out, drew Kevin Fennessy the next year in the quarterfinals of the Irish Championships, training properly as an amateur but like a professional, and I stopped him, his corner through the talon, and that was a real turning point for me. I knew, like, if I put the effort in, I can do this and I can go very far. So that was like people talk about light bulb moments, that was certainly one for me. I always think about what would have happened if I hadn't have continued on, if I hadn't have had that talk with my wife, if I hadn't have rationally tried to think about why I lost to Kevin Fennessy, because I was very, very close to jacking it. I was very, very close. I was thinking about joining the army actually, and just going, and because I'd kind of put my whole life was boxing at that point. I hadn't done anything, I hadn't worked another job, I was focused on boxing, but I was losing to this guy. I was thinking, what am I going to do now? Thinking about joining the army. I ended up deciding against that, sticking it out for another year, and that year I beat Fennessy, I beat Tyrone McKenna, and I beat one of Ireland's greatest ever amateurs, David Oliver Joyce, in the final of the All-Irelands, and that was the point where I knew. But it's like people have these moments all the time, don't they? And you have to realise that very few people get that lucky, that it doesn't come without hard work and dedication, to use a Floyd Mayweather quote. But it's true, it's so true. You have to focus on things, you have to fight through adversity at times. And for that year when I was 21, I certainly done that, and I'm reaping the rewards now. As a pro, I fought Josh Warrington, and I think I was probably slight favourite going into the fight. First 3 rounds were the worst 3 rounds I've ever had in my career. I'd done well to survive them, I'd done well to stay on my feet, but at that point I got beat up in that fight, and beat up pretty bad. In my head the whole way through that fight I was thinking, don't get stopped, fight back here, don't let the referee try and jump in. I didn't want to get stopped, I wanted to see the final bell. I didn't really believe that I could win that fight after about the halfway point, but I wanted to stay in there and fight back and show that I've got balls really. I'm not just someone who's going to fall and quit and pack it in. So that was another point where I was battling with my own head. I was hurt a number of times in that fight, but in my head, the objective after the first few rounds was don't get stopped. And I actually got, not too many people know about this, but I got a bash in the knee, kind of quad, in the first round. There was an exchange of punches, and I think, accidental obviously, but I think his knee has bashed mine. A pretty severe bruising, kind of that covered the length of my quad. And my leg was hurting. It was hurting me. I didn't want to tell the corner, so I made a decision walking back to the corner. I can't tell Jimmy Moore that my leg's sore, because he'll think it's an excuse for me. He's looking for him to pull me out. So I made sure that a conscious decision, don't mention your leg. But the leg was bad. It was that bad that afterwards when I went to the hospital, and obviously I had severe bruising about my head, I was standing at the reception in the hospital, and my leg kind of caved in, and people thought, they kind of rushed around me, they thought it was something to do with my head, but it wasn't. It was just my leg was sore. So, but I made a decision, don't tell Jimmy Moore you've got a sore leg, because he'll think that's my way of saying, please get me out of this situation. I didn't want that to happen.